Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Change Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Chris Ashley. We explore personal development, spirituality, and science. And I'm excited. With me today, I have a trauma recovery coach and clinical hypnotherapist. So I'm assuming our conversation is going to help a lot of people. So tune in for this one for sure. First, a couple quick announcements. Head over to the links in the show notes. You're going to find a lot there. You'll find a link to my book, Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality. It was endorsed by 3 people from The Secret: Michael Beckwith, Marcy Shimoff, Bob Doyle. It was also endorsed by John Gray, who wrote Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. In the links, you'll also find links to my free courses, free downloads, free masterclass, as well as coaching links with me. You'll find ways to sponsor the podcast. And as always, this podcast is part of the Los Angeles Tribune Podcast Network. So we're doing a lot in the personal development realm. I have some amazing fellow podcasters, and we're putting on incredible events too. So come see us. What if the one thing keeping you stuck is the way you think? Welcome to Change Your Mind with Chris Ashley, the podcast where science meets spirituality and mindset becomes your most powerful tool for transformation. I'm Chris Ashley, author of Change Your Mind to Change Your Reality, trainer, speaker, and lifelong seeker. For years, I battled trauma, depression, anger, chronic illness, low self-worth, and the weight of old stories. Until I discovered how to rewire my mind, reconnect with my divine nature, and consciously create a new reality from the inside out. This show is here to help you do the same. Each week, we explore the intersection of personal development, spirituality, and science, diving into topics like healing, emotional mastery, entrepreneurship, resilience, and the quantum nature of reality. You'll hear powerful stories, gain practical tools, and real conversations that will help you change your perspective, get unshakable confidence, and live the vision your soul has always known is possible. Whether you're navigating a major life shift, building your dream business, or seeking deep healing and alignment, you're in the right place. So if you're ready to break through, take back your power, and create a life on your terms, this is your moment. Let's break free from the patterns that hold us back, awaken to who we truly are, and rise. Your transformation starts now. All right, let's get to it. So with me today, I have Ronia Fraser. So Ronia is a multi-award-winning trauma recovery coach and clinical hypnotherapist, and one of the leading experts in the field of narcissistic abuse recovery. She's an internationally published author, globally renowned speaker, and a survivor of narcissistic abuse herself. Since 2017, she's been helping abuse survivors from all over the world get back on their feet, regain their mental health, and recover who they were always meant to be. Her pioneering approach is widely recognized as one of the most effective, structured, and masterful methods for the recovery from complex trauma. So welcome, Ronia. I'm really happy you're here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I always start my episodes the same way, and that is by asking my guests to share their origin story. So what is it that put you on this path of wanting to be a trauma recovery coach, especially with helping people who have been in narcissistic relationships?
Yeah, well, it was never my plan. I actually was a CPA before, and I had a very successful career in finance, but obviously you don't end up working in a very specific field like that unless it has happened to you. So as you just mentioned, I'm a survivor of narcissistic abuse myself. And a few years ago, here in LA, actually, I got involved with the wrong man again. And that time it would cost me almost everything. And it cost me my job, it cost me my house, it cost me my health, it cost me my sanity, it cost me myself, and it almost cost me my life. And as a result of that, I was really struggling with my mental health. And I was committed to getting better, but it was basically impossible to find adequate help. So I was just written off as like a lost cause, like just another crazy woman that lost her mind. And I would go to therapy religiously every week and really, determined to get better. And after months, there was no results whatsoever, and I got really frustrated. I mean, obviously, if you put your time and your money and your tears into something, you want to see results.
Yeah.
And uh, there really wasn't anything moving forward. And when I addressed that with my therapist, she just said, "Well, unfortunately, that's what your life is now, and it's something you need to accept, and we need to find ways to manage it." But I was at a point in my life where I couldn't have promised you I'd still be around tomorrow, so I couldn't just accept this as my life going forward. So I basically went on this mission to find something that could reverse the damage as effectively as it was caused, because I knew something had happened to me, but I didn't know exactly what it was at the time. But I knew something had happened that turned me into this mess. So if it goes one way, surely it's got to go the other way.
Mm.
And that's how I then, set out to find this something. And I didn't know what I was looking for, but as I then, you know, found hypnosis, I found NLP, I found havening techniques, so holistic modalities really, and that was a complete game changer, which obviously also changes the narrative of what we can do when we do have complex post traumatic stress, and that's why I do what I do today.
Thank you for sharing your story. And did you take all of these modalities and create something new of your own? Is that my understanding? Or are these the
Yeah.
modalities that you teach and you just work with all of them?
No, so basically what I did was as I said, I was looking for something to save my own life. And I discovered various different modalities. As I just said, I got trained in them. And then I developed my own approach, which is a very specific uh, approach dealing with narcissistic abuse recovery in particular, because it's a very specific thing to deal with. And there is still, even though it's become this major buzzword, especially on social media, there is still a huge lack of understanding, a huge lack of resources that are available for survivors. So I created basically this very particular approach for narcissistic abuse recovery.
It sounds like really needed and important. So I'd love to ask a little bit more about your story, especially for listeners who don't really understand. Like you said, it's become a buzzword and there isn't
Hmm.
that understanding, especially for people who don't really understand what it's like to be in a relationship with a narcissist. You mentioned that it caused you to lose your house and your job. So can you give us a little bit more of that story? How did it cause you to lose your house and job and as well as your mental health?
Yeah, well, I mean, it all goes hand in hand, because when you lose your mental health, you're not functioning in a normal day-to-day context anymore. If your mental health is very poorly, you can't work. If you can't work, you don't make money. If you don't make money, you can't pay rent. So it's like this whole chain reaction, and it really happened so quickly. And I didn't realize even that I was being abused, because I mean, I was living in Hollywood at the time. And when things started to get weird for me, I just thought Hollywood had gotten to me after all. I made it
Mm.
6 years, and all of a sudden, I was just one of the fallen angels of LA. That was my initial thought, because I didn't even realize that somebody was actually pulling the strings in the background. Because what happens is, with a narcissist, they basically create this illusion of being a soulmate. And I was a very successful, and I wasn't really looking for anything. But of course, we all want to be loved, and we just said all the right things and shared the same insecurities, the same, stories. Of course, he had a sob story of how he grew up. And then there is me with my big heart. And of course, I want to show him that he's lovable and he's so worthy, all the things that we should be directing at ourselves. But we tend to give that away to other people. And I didn't realize when it switched, I could feel it, obviously, that something was completely off. But because I didn't know what I was dealing with, you can't categorize it. Narcissistic abuse is really something, unless it has happened to you, you can't comprehend what's even going on. So all of a sudden I went from being this really highly functioning woman to not being functioning at all. I was walking on eggshells all the time. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me in the mirror. I thought I was going crazy. And I mean, that's the whole plan, right? Because with all the manipulations, with the brainwashing, the gaslighting, all those tactics, what they do is they basically destabilize you, and you lose the trust in yourself. You can't, like, all of a sudden everything you remember doesn't seem to be true anymore, but you are dealing with the person who supposedly loves you, right? And that's where this big disconnect happens, where you can't actually see what's happening. So I basically went from being highly functioning to having anxiety 24/7, unable to go grocery shopping. I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know how I got here. I didn't know where I was going. And yeah, so that then had this knock-on effect, and eventually I got to the point where I just realized that if I don't get out now, I'm not going to make it through another 4 weeks. And that's when I dropped everything that I had built for myself in LA, and went back to Europe.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate your vulnerability. Do narcissists like have this plan, or is it just who they are and they just put on this their best foot forward, so to say, and then their true self kind of comes out, or do they go in with this kind of like evil mentality, do you think?
It depends. So, narcissism or narcissistic abuse is basically on a spectrum, right? So, the lower they are on the spectrum, the less calculated it is. So, you have narcissists or people that show narcissistic behaviors, narcissistic tendencies, but it's actual just behavioral, where they have their own insecurities, and they found those strategies to somehow deal with it, obviously harming others, but because of the lack of empathy, they don't, on self-awareness, they don't really realize that. But the further up you go, you go towards psychopath, like sociopath, psychopath. It goes really all the way up, where it becomes very calculated. So it depends on who you're dealing with. Some are very calculated, and it's like they're playing the long game, and others, they are really unaware of their own behaviors, where it's kind of like a coping strategy. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because the impact it has on the victim is the same, and it's detrimental either way.
So how can someone recognize a narcissist? If I'm thinking from my own experience, I worked for someone that everyone said was a narcissist, and
Mm.
to this day I don't know if he was a narcissist or if he was just very charming and manipulative. I don't know. So I'm curious, like, how do you know? What are the tendencies?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of things that you can go on Google, and you get like the 10 red flags of a narcissist. But the reality is that narcissists come in so many different shapes and forms. So the very classical narcissist that's really over it, who's just full of themselves and the whole world revolves around them, that's usually not what you get in your day-to-day life. Like, the ones that are the dangerous ones are the covert ones, because they
Mm.
are nothing like what we would think a narcissist is like. And there are so many different versions. Even if you figured out one, or you think you have, it's still very likely that you get involved with another one who's just a different shade of narcissist. So, what they all have in common is the lack of empathy, the lack of self awareness, a huge sense of entitlement, and making other people feel worse so they can feel better. At the end of the day, I think the question we need to ask ourselves is, what's happening for us when we deal with a narcissist? Because it's always super easy to find excuses for somebody else's behavior, right? They come home from work, they had a really stressful day, And then, we just excuse their behavior because, they were having a bad day. But when we start focusing on what's going on for us, that's very different because that's actually happening. We can't explain that away. So whether it's in a workplace, whether it's in a romantic relationship, a friendship, a family, it really doesn't matter. What will always happen is that you feel like you're walking on eggshells, as I
Mm.
already mentioned in my own story, where all of a sudden you, because the mask comes on and off, you never know who you're dealing with. So you start compromising your own needs, your own values, your own wants, because you don't want to unleash the monster, right? So walking on eggshells is a high indication that you're dealing with a narcissist, because with a normal person it doesn't happen. With a normal person you feel safe to express yourself, not recognizing the person looking back at you in the mirror. That's a big indication that identity erosion is taking place, which is a big part of narcissistic abuse, where they take everything away that we think we are, because first they really, you know, talk it up because we are the most amazing person they've ever met. And then all of a sudden, all the things that they used to love about us, they take away, So not recognizing the person looking back in the mirror is an indication for that. I think I'm going crazy. I already mentioned it as well. It's an indication for gaslighting, because all of a sudden everything you thought you remember isn't true anymore. So you start questioning yourself. And because you have no reason to doubt them, it's very easy. It's incredibly destabilizing. And then, of course, once you say to yourself or you speak it out loud, I don't know what's wrong with me, I think I'm going crazy, what they will do is really reinforce that narrative. So you think you're going crazy, you're being told that you are crazy, you start behaving crazy, and then that's how the crazy woman, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, because everybody around you thinks that you're crazy. Um, I feel like an addict is a big one as well, especially in the very beginning when we don't have the language yet to explain what's going on, because we know that something is wrong, but we can't put a finger on it and we don't have the language to explain. And I remember I was using that because I recognized in myself, well, I didn't recognize myself anymore. And I would say, I would literally use those words: I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel like I'm an addict. And some people might use, he or she is my heroin, or he or she is my drug, my kryptonite, uh, expressions like that. And the thing is, it doesn't only feel like an addiction, it actually is a chemical dependency. And if somebody feels that way, it indicates that there's trauma bonding at play. So all of those things, as you can tell, they're actually happening inside of us.
Internally.
So we can't just excuse that away. That's actually happening. And for everybody who's questioning whether or whether not they are involved with a narcissist, I would really encourage to go inside, because you actually already know the answer.
I think that that is what you said is so amazing, because as you were talking, I'm like, yes, I felt that way. Yes, I felt that way. Yes, I felt that way. And it just made it so clear because, like you said, you can kind of excuse someone's behaviors,
Mhm.
or, I'm just thinking about my own experience. It's like, oh, but he did these really great things too. But then, yes, I felt that way. And bringing it back to yourself, like, that's something that no one can take away from you. That's something you can't excuse away. That's something that you
Exactly.
can't deny, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like a tangible thing that's within you. So I think that that's so helpful for so many people listening if they're questioning what's going on. And even if you're not in a relationship with a narcissist and there's someone in your life who has some sort of um, personality disorder of any kind, you can put it back to yourself, right? Like, how am I feeling around this person? And I think that that's
Exactly.
such a healthy way of figuring it out. So
It
one
also
thing that
doesn't matter if you call them a narcissist or whatever, right? Like,
yeah.
narcissist is just a label that's become popular and is
Sure.
trending. But whether you call them a narcissist or, whatever you want to call them, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, it always comes down to how you feel, as you just said. How do I feel around this person? And if someone doesn't make us feel good, well, I mean, they gotta go, and
Totally.
we actually have the right, and we have to learn it, but we do have the right to put those boundaries in place, and we do have the right to decide who is allowed into our inner circle and who isn't. And if somebody or something doesn't make us feel good, I'm very strict with that at this point. If something or someone doesn't make me feel good, they're out. Like whether that's a person, whether that's a job, whether that's food, whether that's a location, it doesn't matter. Um, because we are very intuitive, so we know what
Yeah.
works for us.
And we're energy beings, right? Like we have
Exactly.
to go off of our own energy. I think that's a really good rule. And I want to point out something that you said. Like it doesn't matter if you call them a narcissist because it's just another label. And we kind of like hinted at like social media a little bit. And I know that we're gonna talk about that, but it's kind of it's kind of become one of those things that people just throw around.
Mhm.
Like, he's such a narcissist. And it almost diminishes the real narcissists out there who are
It
doing
does.
abusive behavior. And I feel like I see the same thing all over social media, especially with like the social justice movement a little bit, where people can so easily throw around labels that are really serious
Mhm.
because no one's going to argue with those labels. But it almost diminishes the real thing in a way. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, on the one hand, obviously, it's good that we start talking about it. When I started this work, it didn't mean anything. It was 8 years ago. People thought, I'm barking up the wrong tree, and just I had so many doors slammed in my face because it didn't mean anything. Whereas now, that has changed a lot. Now people come to me, they invite me to come speak, give trainings, give commentary in the media, those kind of things. So that has changed a lot. People don't get away with behaviors anymore like they used to. They get called out. We have a better
Totally.
understanding of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, which is important, especially when we have unhealthy programs running in the background, to identify actually being treated that way, even if it's normal for me because I don't know it any different, it's actually not acceptable. So a lot has changed for the positive, and it's a good thing that we're talking about it. But then on the other hand, as you said, it diminishes the seriousness of the topic, because all of a sudden everybody who has hurt our feelings for whatever reason is very quickly labeled a narcissist. And the danger with that is that people just get so tired of the words, so they will stop listening. And it's a very, very fine line, because we need to talk about it. There's still so much more work that needs to be done because it's still not mainstream. Survivors can't find help. So clearly, there's still so much work to do. But because, especially online, a lot of the content that's being created is very, very bad content. It really hinders the healing rather than promote the healing. Um, it's important that it's talked about in the right way, because it's an incredibly important topic.
I think that's a really good point about there being a fine line that on the one hand, people can't get away with stuff anymore, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's also people who may not deserve those kind of labels being called them. So you mentioned that there's a lot of bad content out there. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, narcissistic abuse is, I think, the third most trending hashtag on TikTok. So it's huge.
Wow.
And uh, since people now understand what it actually means, and because there are so many people that have experienced it, no doubt about that, you have a lot of experts now. And I haven't met a single narcissistic abuse survivor who couldn't write a PhD on the topic, which is a fact, because part of the healing in the beginning is really like this obsessive learning about the topic, because what we've experienced is so out of this world that it just doesn't make any sense. But we are brainy people, right? So we need to kind of put things into place, what has happened to us. So there is a lot of content out there now that educates about narcissists. However, very rarely we talk about the recovery, because the focus tends to always be on the narcissist. I personally don't spend any time or energy on the narcissist whatsoever, because I couldn't care less about them. I'm all about the recovery. And then what also happens is, yes, you may have all of this in-depth knowledge. However, most people online, they haven't actually done the healing work, which is key to narcissistic abuse recovery. So all the content that's created is very bad linguistically, because, they're obviously not trained in language. Language is just on autopilot. So that has a huge impact on how it makes the person on the receiving end feel. And just being unaware of the words that are being used. And very often it comes from a place of bitterness and anger and hate and resentment, because obviously the healing hasn't taken place yet. So if you're already in a bad place, that's the last energy you want to engage in, because what happens is it really drags you down. And then you may find yourself in those support groups and forums and, Facebook groups, Reddit, wherever. And of course, you're looking for help. You're looking for validation that what happened to you actually is a real thing. And by the way, it is 100% it is. But what happens is that then people get stuck into telling the story over and over again, and everybody has a war story. So I think what's super, super important to understand is that the brain actually can't distinguish if something's happening for real or whether you're imagining it. So if you are in those support groups, even though your intention obviously is good because you're looking for support and you're looking for help, as you keep telling your own story over and over again, as you keep reading other people's stories over and over again, it's incredibly re-traumatizing, because your brain literally can't distinguish that this isn't happening right now. But the chemical reactions, the neurological responses in the brain, they're all the same. So that's why when you engage online, I really recommend that your news feed is highly curated, where you don't just follow everybody who talks about it, but be really selective of who you follow, what their qualifications are, right? Like if somebody, for example, is trained in NLP or hypnosis, they are trained linguistically, for example. So you know that the way they express things is much more healthy than somebody who just has the language on autopilot, things like that.
What you just said, that your brain can't distinguish what you're imagining versus what happened, is so important. And I just want to take a Sharpie and underline that so many times. And I talk about that a lot in my book from the other point of view of manifesting the life of your dreams.
Exactly.
Right. But it works the same way when you're reliving a trauma. And
Exactly the
it's
same way.
it's not just that when you say you're reliving a trauma, literally the same hormones, the same chemicals are being created by your body, the same cortisol, right? The same adrenaline. And then that floods your central nervous system. And then your central nervous system sends that out to your immune system, your digestive system, your respiratory system, your endocrine system, everything. So it can quite literally make you sick, literally, right? Apart from the mental health, it is so important that you're not just reliving that over and over again. And I love that you said that. And something that you had said, not to put your own words back in your mouth, but when we first chatted before, because for listeners, I often have preliminary calls with people, you said you get more of what you focus on. And I thought that was such a great way of saying it when you're focusing more on the narcissist rather than the healing. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that too.
Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings is energy flows where the attention goes.
Yeah.
And if you're not familiar with that, just write it down and read it out 3 times, seriously, because it is so true. Whether we are manifesting something, as you just mentioned, or whether we are dealing with something adverse, because what we focus on is what we get more of. Where the attention goes, that's where all our energy flows. So as you actually spend all this time researching narcissists, trying to figure them out, trying to find a way to beat them at their own game, like getting really becoming an expert on narcissists, all your energy, drains out of you. But actually, recovery does require a lot of energy. So then, obviously, if you have like this leak of energy going on, then you won't find the energy to actually start moving forward. And the beautiful thing is that we are actually in control of our thoughts. And it may not sound true, but it actually is a fact. Like you can decide if your thoughts, trail off somewhere to go like, oh no, I'm not focusing on this right now. And you bring the thought back in and you redirect it. And as we become aware that we are actually in control of our thoughts, then in turn also means we're in control of our results. So instead of focusing on the narcissist, instead of focusing on those groups and the story and all those kind of things that actually, as you already know from your own experience, make you feel worse anyway in the first place, because you're not getting better even though you're doing all of this. It's really important to get to a point where you realize, okay, I know everything I need to know. And I'm purposefully not saying everything there is to know, because every day somebody comes up with a new technical term, whatever. I don't care. There is a point where you know everything you need to know, and that's sufficient to please your conscious mind, your logical brain. You know what you're dealing with. And then there has to be a very conscious decision to move away from what has happened and away from them onto yourself and your healing.
I couldn't agree more. And we're talking about narcissists here, but that is so translatable to anything.
Yes.
Right? Like literally anything. Like it's right now when we're recording this, it's 1 week till the US elections. And
Mhm.
it's like just that has been like, oh my God, I have to stop just seeing it in my TikTok
Absolutely.
feed.
Hmm.
It's starting to get to my mental health. It's
Yeah.
it's such a thing. And I wanted to also call out, you're trained in NLP, and you were commenting on the language that people use, and language is so important, whether it's your own thoughts or what you're reading, because
Hmm.
it's like programming your subconscious mind. Right. So I talk so much about like the language you use when you speak, think, and write, but I love that you also are saying, oh no, it's also the language that those creators use
Yeah.
that you follow.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, because if it's just on autopilot, it it carries the wrong message, it carries the wrong energy. But
Mm,
obviously, their intention is good. They want to provide information. However, from a healing perspective, it just doesn't serve the purpose it's intended for. And with language, it's one of my favorite things, because once we become aware of the language we use, we can very easily change it, which in turn very quickly changes the way we feel.
yeah.
And for example, one thing I tell all of my clients is, and we all tend to do that because autopilot, when we experience something adverse, and we there is a time where we all feel sorry for ourselves, because no one deserves what happens. And so when we then go into this, why did this happen? Why me? Why this? Why that? Just using the word why, and like removing the word why out of your vocabulary and replacing it with what or how. Like, how did this actually happen to me? What's the purpose of all of this? Like it completely changes the energy of the question, because when we use the word why, we already judge ourselves. It has a very judgmental connotation to it. So before you even get an answer, you already judge yourself. And when we remove the word why, and try, by the way, because when we try something, we always leave the back door open to chicken out. We don't try, we just do. So
Right.
when you catch
Like
yourself,
Yoda says.
yeah, when you catch yourself like, oh, I'll try to do more self care. I try to look after myself more. No, just, cut out the try and say, I'm going to look after myself more. I am
Right.
looking after myself more. And just those little things, which is super simple, but it completely changes the way you feel about yourself, the way you feel about life, the answers you get, right? Because if you stop asking why and start asking how, your unconscious mind will provide you with the answers you need to know. And those are just two really simple examples how language can make such a huge difference.
You and I are so aligned. I literally talk about the same thing in my
Oh
book,
yeah.
and about the why versus the how and what. And here's the other part of it. It's like insight doesn't create transformation. Like knowing why something happened doesn't change the trajectory of your future,
Hmm.
right? But you can ask like what next step can I take, or how can I use this opportunity to grow,
Yeah.
right? And that creates transformation and that pathway before you. So I love that you said that. You're actually the first guest that's ever talked about that on the show, and that makes me really excited that you're talking about it. So let's talk about actually healing now and recovery. So, you know, so someone realizes they've been in a relationship with a narcissist, they've made that break. Like, what do they do? Like, what's your first step with someone?
Well, the very first step has to be no contact. And everybody who's dealing with the whole narcissistic abuse thing knows it's rule number one. Also, every single person will come up with 110 excuses why no contact doesn't apply to their particular situation. I'm here to tell you it does. And I know some of the listeners won't like me hear me say that, but it's actually the truth because at the end of the day, you can't heal in an environment that makes you sick in the first place.
Mm,
And if you are in touch with your abuser, and even if it's just having their phone number still in the phone, you can have the best therapist in the world, you're not going to get the results that you're looking for because very simply you may be putting all your time and effort and tears into your recovery, but then you go home or you get this one text message. And narcissists are really, it's really bizarre because there is so much energy involved. They can pick up on you getting better, and for sure you will get this text message, hey, just checking in, hi, I just drove past your house, like those kind of messages.
yeah.
So it's really really important when you do the healing work, when you're ready to move forward, to create a safe and trigger free environment for yourself. Now, of course, if there are children involved, if there are legal proceedings involved, it's a bit more challenging, but the rule still applies the same because you will need to minimize that contact as much as possible. So ideally, through a third neutral party or using parenting apps like My Family Wizard, those kind of things that take all kind of personal communication out. So no more WhatsApp, no more family barbecues for the sake of the kids, no more joint parents' evenings, things like that. And even though you're still dealing with the ex partner because of the legal proceedings, because of the children, it still allows you to create this safe space that allows for the healing to happen. And once we actually do the healing work on ourselves, dealing with the core, dealing with the ex will become easier because if there are no buttons to push, you don't respond the way you're doing right now. But right now, of course, they know exactly how to push your buttons, and that's why they do it.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And that's really cool that there is an app that communication can go through. I've never heard of that before. What was it called? Family something?
My family wizard, or our family wizard,
Oh,
actually,
that's
our
great.
family wizard. It's available in the US as well, I believe.
That's great.
Yeah, and it's also a court-approved app. So, and that way, it takes all the personal aspect out of it. And at the end of the day, when the children are involved, the best thing you can do is really focus on your own healing because you're leading by example,
Sure.
and it's the only way to protect yourself against the narcissist. So that's super super important. And I know that it's the hardest decision to make, really, because we're dealing with an addiction, remember, it's a
Mhm.
trauma bond. So as we actually decide to go no contact, what are we doing? We're literally cutting off our supply. But if you think about it, a narcissist isn't only the drug, they're the drug dealer at the same time, right?
Mm.
Which puts them in complete control. So no contact is absolutely vital. I don't work with anybody who is still in touch with their abuser.
That's
That's
a good rule. So let's talk about like the healing modalities themselves.
mm,
You mentioned hypnosis, you mentioned havening. I've
yes.
never heard of havening. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so havening is the psychosensory modality, which involves touch. And it's very beautiful because it's so simple and so effective. And I'm very much for gentle and effective. I don't really believe in this really volatile emotional release work and things like that because trauma healing doesn't have to be cruel. And so all you need is your hands, and I can show you
Yeah, if you
how
wouldn't
it
mind
works.
walking through, yeah.
Yeah, I can show you the very basic havening touch. We can use havening for various different um, purposes. So there are certified havening practitioners when it's like deep trauma work, things like that. But there is a lot you can actually do yourself already. And it's the first tool I share with every single one of my clients because what it will allow you to do is regulate your nervous system very, very quickly.
Mm.
And that's what we want, right? When we do healing work, you don't want to get dependent on somebody to make you feel better. So you don't want to have your therapist on speed dial because you go into an anxiety attack or whatever. So it's very, very important when you're looking for help actually to make sure the person equips your toolbox so you become very self-sufficient. And havening is one of those tools. So you put your right hand on the left shoulder, left hand on the right shoulder, which sounds much more complicated than it is. And then you simply start stroking from the shoulder to the elbow in one direction. So don't go like that because that will charge you up. It's really from the shoulder to the elbow in one direction. And while you're doing that at a pressure that feels right for you, you can also focus on your breathing. So you take a deep breath in. And just by doing this, for a few seconds, you can already tell how comforting and how calming this actually is. And what's happening here is that we release delta brain waves, which are
Mm.
very relaxing. And when we are dealing with adversity, and trauma and healing work, it's important that we feel safe. And it's a bit similar to, when something happens to a child, what do? You pick up the child, you cradle the child feels safe, whatever happened passes through. Now we are adults, right? So this is a very nice way how we can create a safe space for ourselves. And you can also do the face.
Mm.
And I personally love the face. There are people that don't like the face so much. But if you think about it, it's not rocket science, right? Because what do we do when we get stressed? We rub our forehead.
Mm.
So it's really about just becoming aware of things that we already do and use them to our advantage.
It's
And
like healing touch.
it's like healing touch. Yeah. And it regulates the nervous system so quickly. So whenever there is any kind of emotional overwhelm, whether there's anxiety or sadness or anger or whatever it may be, like this is a way to very quickly regulate a nervous system, which then obviously allows us to be response able rather than just firing off emotional triggers. And that gives us so many more options to deal with a situation, especially when it's a tricky situation. And my favorite one actually is the public friendly version. It's simply rubbing your hands together in a circular motion. And that one, I do it all the time. Because at this point, this for me is unconscious. When my nervous system feels like I need regulation, that's what I'm going to do. And this is something that you can do anywhere at any time, and nobody will ever know what you're doing there. So if you're at work, in a meeting, whatever, do it under the table, do it on the table. Doesn't matter. When I do my public speaking, I sometimes stand on stage and just do that. Nobody knows what I'm doing there, but what I'm doing is I'm regulating my nervous system. So that is that's the very basic havening touch without any particular application, but just the utilization of that touch is incredibly powerful.
It is really soothing. I feel
It
calmer,
is.
and
Yeah.
it made me think of, like, when I'm having a hard time or I'm crying and just having someone, like, hold you and
Yeah.
just, like, kinda, like, rub you and be like, "It's okay." Like, it's doing that to yourself. It's like giving yourself a hug.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's so beautiful. And since I added it to my offering, so when I do sessions with my clients, I encourage them to just whenever they feel like there is some emotions coming up, to just haven themselves while we're even doing the sessions. And what's happened as a result of that is that there are literally no app reactions, because you actually create a safe space for yourself. And even though we are doing deep healing work, it's in a very gentle way.
I really love that. So I want to hear a little bit about your pioneering approach. You took all of these modalities after you had healed. Like, how do you work with people? What's your approach?
So the interesting thing with narcissistic abuse actually is, even though we all have a story straight out of the movies, the tactics that were used by the abuser are all the same. The symptoms that we experience as the survivors are all the same. And I've been doing this for 8 years now, so I've actually noticed that the healing also follows the same
Mm,
pattern. And what I have been able to do based on my own experience, and then obviously working with clients, is to really refine the approach to narcissistic abuse recovery, because we don't only need to deal with the acute trauma, right? Like somebody comes out of that relationship, is highly activated, uh, probably not even functioning in day-to-day activities. So we need to take care of that. We need to stabilize the emotional well-being. So basically put the feedback on the ground so
mm,
somebody can navigate again. Because when we are in a traumatized state, we cannot, right? We're not in control of our emotions, our lives. So that's important. But the thing is, if you leave it at that, the person will be back in like 6 months' time, a year's time, because they just got involved with another narcissist,
mm.
just a different shade, right? So it's important that we not only deal with that, but also address the developmental trauma. So what I also do is exploring, what is this actually really about? What's that carrot that the narcissist was dangling in front of your nose that you were so desperate to have?
Mm.
Because unless we actually explore and update those faulty, outdated programs that got us into trouble in the first place, it's highly likely it will happen again in the future. Because we have the conscious mind where you have all this knowledge, theoretical knowledge, but if the wrong program is still running in the background, which, maybe feeling unworthy or unlovable, not feeling seen, not feeling heard, very universally not being good enough, right? That's a huge one that a lot of women and men actually are running in the background. Those kind of faulty programs that actually allow us to be treated in a way that's unacceptable, unless we really dive deep and run an update on those, everything will just continue to happen. And if you think about it, most likely, if you're listening right now and you are in this situation and you really think about it, you may realize that actually this isn't the first time this has happened. And it was the same for me. Since I started dating when I was a teenager, I never had a healthy relationship. But
Mm.
the thing that happened in LA, it wasn't the first, it was just the worst. And then I realized, oh, but hold on a second. So what is it about me actually that keeps getting me into trouble? And that's very, very important. So first of all, the knowledge is important. So, but you can do all the reading you want, you still won't feel better, right? So you can please your logical mind, but the symptoms will still be the same. So what I do in my approach is, for one, to stabilize the emotional well-being, to give you your agency back, and then also dive deeper to ensure it won't happen again in the future.
I love that approach so much because you're right. And it's such a painful thing to realize and hear, but like you are the common denominator. And that's not
Yeah.
saying it's your fault, but it's
Mm.
saying that there's something that you're getting or you want to get out of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's so incredible that you're looking holistically at people, because if you can heal that underlying root limiting belief, for lack of a better term, they're not going to find themselves in that again. So,
It's also very empowering actually realizing that.
mm,
Because, I mean, initially, we always look at other people, but once we take responsibility for ourselves, it also means we can change it. And that realization of, yes, actually, I'm the common denominator here, um, is very empowering because we can't change other people. We can't change what happened, but what we can change is ourselves. We can change how we feel about things. And that in itself is incredibly empowering. And as we already said, with certain modalities like hypnosis, NLP, where it's really about taking it out of the cognitive function, that healing work isn't as long and painful as it's always made out to be, because what actually happens is once you get over that hump, and it's scary, I'm not going to lie, but once you get over that hump and you realize how much is possible and how much control you have over your life and how many things you can change, it actually becomes fun because you realize that you are in control of all of this. And it was never about them in the first place. It's always been about you. They just open a door for you with an invitation to walk through. And I mean, you know, if you take that invitation, it will really be the biggest gift you can give yourself.
yeah, that absolutely makes sense, because you can't, it's disempowering to place blame on outside events and situations, right? Because you stay in your comfort zone of playing small, you might be able to avoid some guilt, but you're not going to be able to step into your power and heal. So I like that you called that out. So I think you kind of answered this, but I want like a little bit of clarification. And I know we don't have a lot of time left, but once you help someone realize what those limiting beliefs are, how does someone go in and change that? Because a lot of that is buried deep in the unconscious. And I know you said you use tools like
Hmm.
hypnosis, and is it just so much as like helping people to even notice that they're there and then they can consciously change them? Or like how do you get deep into the unconscious and root that out and replace it with something that's healthier?
Yeah, so the healing won't happen in the cognitive function. That's where, for example, counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy falls short, because you might even get to the point to realize what that limiting belief is, what that faulty program is that keeps getting you into trouble. So then you are consciously aware of it. And then, you realize, oh, my behavior isn't serving me. I keep getting involved with the same kind of uh, partners, and then you're basically told to behave differently now because now you know. The problem with that is we are all emotional beings. So we always feel something before we do something.
Mm.
So even if you force yourself to not fall into the same pattern again and you very consciously change the way you behave, there will be a situation where that emotion is just going to fire up and the lid will just blow up. So instead of just realizing where it comes from and accepting it and doing better, it's important to address it on the emotional level, because when there is no emotional trigger firing off, that behavior is just going to fall away. And whether that's dating the same kind of type or whether that's any kind of behavior, drinking, eating, doesn't matter, any kind of coping mechanism, we always need to resolve the underlying emotional trigger to start with. And then the behavior will change. And to be able to do that, we need to take the healing outside of the cognitive function, which means bypassing the chatterbox that always knows everything better. And hypnosis is a beautiful way to do that. And obviously, hypnosis, well, obviously for me, hypnosis is not what you see on TV. It's not about running around like a chicken, unless, of course, that's what you want to do. So, hypnosis is all about deep relaxation. which also then gives you access to the unconscious mind and to the emotional level. But what it also allows you to do is realize that a state of calm, a state of peace and stillness is actually available to you, because obviously when our nervous system is highly activated, just the thought of stillness is impossible to even
Mm.
comprehend. So when I use hypnosis with my clients, it's basically twofold, right? For one, it's to learn that this beautiful state of being is actually available to them. And self hypnosis is actually a thing. So you can learn how you can get to this state of being by yourself. So that's one thing, because it regulates the nervous system. And then it also gives us the access to identify those faulty programs that are running, because you may even think you know where it comes from, but in reality, it's something completely different, you know?
Absolutely. Well, okay. I think it's beautiful work that you're doing. I know you said that you live in Europe. Do you work with people virtually, or is something like
Yeah.
hypnosis need to be done in person?
No, no, no. You can do it online. I work all over the world.
Amazing. So I'm sure listeners want to know where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and before you go into that, I just want to thank you so much for being here. This was such an enlightening conversation, and I'm sure so many people got so much out of it. I'm still thinking about the fact that it's the third trending hashtag on TikTok. Like that to me, I'm like, what percentage of the population is narcissistic? Then that's like pretty wild. So I think it's really important the work that you're doing, and I appreciate you out there doing it. And please go ahead and go and do some self promotion, because I'm sure people want to connect with you.
Okay, so obviously you can find me on social media, Instagram and Facebook. I'm actually not on TikTok. I'm rock and roll coach Ronnie, and my website is roniafraser.com. You can find some freebies on the website as well. We talked about the recovery journey, how everyone is going through the same motions. You can find more information about that in the free ebook you can download from the website, where I share with you a framework I developed that will show you how far you've already come, which is most likely much further than you think, and also what lies ahead of you, with some really practical tips on how to move forward that you can do by yourself. And you can also find my book, Me, Myself, and I, Your A to Z Defining Back to You After Narcissistic Abuse. It's on Amazon, and it's a very practical book that helps you build your toolbox. So if you are struggling with shifting your focus away and learning the beautiful art of self-care and really reconnecting with yourself, I highly recommend it because it's very practical. I'm a very pragmatic person, so it's all about helping you to build your toolbox. So go check that out as well.
Amazing. I love that you're the rock and roll coach, because you got the tattoos, you got the pink hair, but yeah, you're amazing. I appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
If you are listening and you feel like there's someone out there that needs to hear this, please send it to them. Like, comment, share, subscribe, all the things. Let's help raise the consciousness of humanity and make the world a little bit better of a place. And thank you all so much. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. I will see you next week.